When I first met Theo, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I had just transferred colleges, eager to throw myself into my studies and put my full focus on finishing my degree. But as life has a funny way of reminding you, sometimes the most unexpected encounters change your plans. Theo and I met during a seminar for our final semester, a class neither of us had really wanted to take, but both needed to graduate. Our professor, a quirky but passionate woman in her 40s, insisted on having everyone partner up for group projects. Theo and I ended up paired together after the initial awkward shuffling of people picking friends. At first, I was indifferent, he seemed quiet, a bit reserved, and I was sure we'd just get through the project, get our grades, and move on. But something shifted after the first couple of study sessions. Theo's dry sense of humor and quiet intelligence caught me off guard. I was used to loud personalities, people who made their presence known immediately. But Theo had this subtlety to him. He didn't command a room, but once you paid attention to him, you couldn't help but notice his wit, the way he saw the world in a slightly tilted way that made mundane things seem funny or profound. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. After a few weeks of working together, I began to look forward to our study sessions, not just to finish the assignment but because I enjoyed his company. It didn't take long for us to start seeing each other outside of class. At first, we were that couple that couldn't get enough of each other. There were endless late-night talks about our hopes and fears, spontaneous road trips to nowhere in particular, and the kind of heady attraction that feels all-consuming. We moved in together shortly after graduating. Everyone thought we were moving too fast, but it felt right at the time. We were building a life together, creating something that felt bigger than either of us. We had arguments like any couple, but we always seemed to find our way back to each other. I thought that bond was unbreakable. Our wedding, 2 years into the relationship, felt like the culmination of everything we had worked for. It was a small, intimate ceremony, just family and close friends. I remember looking at Theo during our vows, feeling so certain that this was my forever. He had a way of making me feel safe, like no matter what happened, we would get through it together. I thought we were partners in every sense of the word. But things started to change after we got married. At first, it was subtle. Theo became more distant, but I chalked it up to stress from work. He had just started a new job that came with a lot of pressure, and I knew he was trying to prove himself. I wanted to be understanding, so I gave him space, thinking it was what he needed. But as months went by, the distance between us grew. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now felt forced. There were days when I felt like I was living with a stranger. I started to notice how often he'd come home late, always with the excuse of a work meeting or project deadline. At first, I believed him. After all, his job was demanding, and I knew how competitive his field could be. But there were small things that didn't add up, the way he'd quickly put his phone down when I walked into the room or how he seemed distracted, even when we were supposed to be spending time together. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. I loved him, and I trusted him. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Then came the talk about starting a family. It had been something we discussed in passing before, but Theo had always been more hesitant than I was. I had dreams of having kids, of building a family with him, but I also knew it had to be the right time for both of us. So when Theo brought it up one evening over dinner, saying he was ready to try for a baby, I was overjoyed. It felt like we were finally back on the same page, like the distance that had grown between us was about to be closed. Little did I know, it was all a facade. The pregnancy happened faster than I expected. I was ecstatic when the test came back positive. I remember running into the living room to tell Theo, my heart pounding with excitement. He smiled, hugged me, and told me he was happy, but there was something off about his reaction. I brushed it aside at the time, thinking he was just processing the news. We agreed to keep the pregnancy private for the first few months, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, it's common advice to wait before making an announcement. But then, a week later, I saw a message on Theo's phone from a coworker, casually asking, "Are you okay with the pregnancy?" My stomach dropped. Why would his coworker be asking him that? Shouldn't Theo be excited to share the news? Why would he need to process it with someone else? I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I went through his phone. What I found shattered me. Theo had been texting back and forth with his coworker for weeks about a new woman at his office. Natasha. The name alone made me feel sick. In the texts, Theo confessed to his coworker that he was struggling with feelings of attraction toward Natasha. He admitted that he enjoyed spending time with her, that she made him laugh, and that he was starting to resent me. Resent me. Those words cut deeper than anything else. In the texts, he mentioned how our relationship had changed, how he found me annoying at times, and how he preferred being at work than at home. Even worse, Theo had confided that he wasn't sure he was in love with me anymore. He told his coworker that he felt guilty but thought that maybe having a baby would reignite the spark between us. I couldn't believe what I was reading. All this time, I thought we were trying to build a family because we loved each other, but in reality, Theo had been using the idea of a baby as a last-ditch effort to save something he wasn't even sure he wanted anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment we had shared over the last few months. How could I have been so blind? How could he betray me like this? I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I felt was numb. The man I had trusted with my heart, the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, had been lying to me. The next morning, I confronted him. I waited until he was in the kitchen, making his coffee like it was just another day. My hands were shaking as I held his phone, the text still open on the screen. "Do you have something to tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, confused at first, but when he saw the phone in my hand, his expression changed. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to explain it away. Instead, he just stood there, silent. I could see the guilt written all over his face, but it didn't matter. I didn't care about his guilt. I wanted answers. "Why, Theo, why would you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you tell me you wanted a baby if you weren't even sure about us?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I thought it might help. I thought maybe it would fix things between us." "Fix things," I repeated, incredulous. "You think a baby is some kind of band-aid for our marriage?" I didn't want to lose you," he admitted. "But I don't know how to feel anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always prided myself